This episode of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast is brought to you by, well, the Creative Clinicians Corner, my consulting business that helps therapists bring to life their practice and is really kind of the hub of where this show is. And I just wanted to let you know that we're going to be opening up opportunities to participate in the 6-month mastermind group. I've hosted this group the past 2 years, and it's usually a small group, but that intimacy is really nice and supportive and nurturing and kind. And it's just a great way to have consistency and accountability in what you're doing as you're taking steps that feel uncomfortable and maybe risky as you're starting your business or growing your business. The mastermind group is really for folks in those early stages. If you're already wildly successful, this is not the group for you. This is a group for folks that are starting out, they're feeling a bit nervous, they need support, they need resources to kind of help organize them along the way. And they're looking to be doing that in community with other folks that are doing the same thing. So if that sounds like you, check it out. It's going to start in February. It'll run February to through July, and it's going to be on Mondays at 1 p.m. We'll have 3 live Zoom meetings per month. The fourth meeting will be like a co-working session that folks can meet together and work on specific tasks that they're developing in their business. And it's structured where one meeting per month is more of like training, guidance. Um, the others are hot seat style, where you present something that you're working on, something that you're having a challenge with, and then you receive support and feedback from the group or about that. And I'll be giving lots of templates and resources, things that you can download to guide you in that process. And we also have a private Facebook group where we stay connected throughout the weeks. And even the folks that were in the group this year decided they wanted to continue to meet. So they've been meeting and doing like once a month co working Zoom groups to stay connected and to continue to support one another. So it's a really nice group. If you're interested, you can go over to creativeclinicianscorner.com/mastermind dash group. It's also under the lab tab. If you click on that, the button will pop down. And there you'll find lots of ways on the sales page to set up a 20-minute call with me to really see if this is the right thing for you. If it is, awesome. But if not, maybe there's something else I might be able to recommend that would be beneficial for you at this stage of where you're at. So I hope to hear from you and maybe even get to know you a bit more in 2023. And I'll just share with you, what somebody shared with me, Jennifer Lawrence, who was on the show recently, or maybe she'll be on the show in a couple of episodes. She's been participating in the group the past 2 years, and this is what she said. And she gave me permission to use that, to use it. So she said, "This is my second year participating in the mastermind. And wow, Raina's so skilled at creating a supportive group environment while skillfully inviting participants to work at the edges of their mindset barriers. I gained so much from being a part of the group, including the confidence to keep taking bigger and bigger steps forward in my business," which is so awesome. And I love being able to support and witness that growth. in the folks that I'm working with. So if it sounds interesting to you, please sign up for one of those 20-minute calls and we'll see if it's a good fit. All right, back to the show. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. This is episode 1, season 2, with Rachel Moore, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's an EMDR therapist. She is a creative writer and all around creative person. And she is also the host of a podcast called Beyond Artist Block. And it's really focusing on, helping people who work with creative clients. And I just thought, wow, that's so cool. Her niche is creative people. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as we talk all about what that looks like and how she has helped herself to be successful and how she's creating online groups that convert in her practice.
The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative, focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Thanks so much for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I'm delighted to welcome my next guest. Her name is Rachel Moore. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's a certified EMDR therapist based in San Diego, California. She's licensed in both California and Montana, and her private practice focuses on helping the creative community, writers, artists, and musicians. She also facilitates an annual online Artist's Way workshop based on the popular book by Julia Cameron. Rachel is excited to be launching her new podcast, which she just shared with me that her second episode dropped today as we're recording this. And her podcast is called Beyond Artist Block, and it highlights other practitioners like her who work with creative clients. She's a creative person herself and has a bachelor's degree in creative writing, along with years of experience playing and singing music. Welcome, Rachel. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Raina. I'm excited to be here. I love just the whole concept, the name of your podcast, everything about it is just way up my alley.
Yes, clearly we're aligned in spirit. But creativity is definitely, I feel like my beacon, my guiding light of life. It's so important. So let's talk a little bit about how you decided to niche into working specifically with creatives. I think you're one of the first therapists that I've learned that does that. I know some creativity coaches, but not necessarily therapists.
It's so exciting to hear you say that this is like the first that you've heard of this, because that's part of the reason why I decided to launch my podcast too. Just like I said, to find more people like me. I know we're out there. I'm based in San Diego, and I feel like I've looked around, and there are some in LA, of course. I feel like in San Diego, I may be one of the only folks to lead with that. That I work with creative people. Of course, I get lots of other types of people as well, because that's what happens when you niche, right? You get your niche and you get everybody else, which is great and keeps it interesting. But I made the decision. It was it was kind of a funny process, because I knew I wanted to be in private practice after I finished school and was working on my internships at the time. I knew eventually when I got licensed, I wanted to be in private practice. And I thought, gosh, what am I going to focus on? I know I need to, and I already had been teaching Artist Way workshops. I had already been facilitating that as a creativity coach. I did that when I was in school, just for fun and experience. And I thought, gosh, I don't know. And I was really hung up on the idea that as a therapist, we can't treat people we know, right?
Mm.
And I thought, well, I've got this whole big creative community. I also did like meetup events. I had meetup groups where I would go to museums and do other sorts of creative things or create art together. Like
Fun.
I had this whole community of people, and I thought, well, I can't, I can't treat those people. So I don't know who to treat. I feel like now my site was very limited. A very good friend of mine who's an awesome marketing person. The first day I met her, actually, I was in a little marketing class with her, and she said, "Here's what you do. You don't treat those people. You treat the people they know, right? It's okay. You
Mm.
treat the second degree of your contacts." And after that, it all fell into place and made sense. And I just had that one little piece of the niche that I needed to get clear on, and she helped me a lot with that.
I love that you treat the second degree of your established contacts, and your established contacts become
Right.
your ambassadors. That's awesome.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So, um, with the Artist Way workshops that you currently
Mhm.
provide, um, obviously those are online. Are you pulling
Mhm.
from people from all over? Or are you just
Mm.
pulling from people where you're licensed? Are you treating that workshop as like a non-therapy offering?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I consider it educational, right? And so it's, not quite coaching, also not therapy. I'm coming to it as a therapist and treating it as an educational group. I had done it as a therapy group previously. Before 2020, I was meeting people in person, so the San Diego area, essentially. I had experimented, early on with a few things. Like I did an email course once on the Artist Way when I was training to be a creativity coach. That was really fun, but not quite the same vibe. And then in 2020, a friend and I, he was going to co-host it with me, co-facilitate. We've had the place. It was right in my neighborhood. It was great. This cute little art store. And, we were just about to launch and COVID hit. And
Mm.
so I decided to move the course online, and it's been great. And I have gotten people from, New York, all the way from California to New York. I've gotten lawyers, therapists, educators, like all sorts of different people who are interested in exploring the creative side of themselves in I know this is an overused phrase, but really in a safe way, in a safe place.
Mhm.
And I emphasize that a lot in that group because it really is all about overcoming our preconceived notions of what it means to be creative, including the fact that if we're an artist, we have to just overturn our life and, we can't ever make money again and whatever, people think about that. Um, yeah. And the fact too, the idea that in order to be an artist, like she says in the book, you have to be a capital A art artist, right? You have to, like, it has to be your life. And I really don't believe that. I mean, my education was a liberal arts education. I love learning about all kinds of different things, which is why I like just the concept of podcasts. I love having my own. I love being on them. I love listening to them. So that's where I come from when it comes to teaching that workshop. I know it's a lot more than your question, but
No,
it's
that's
an exciting thing.
okay. Yeah, I would love for you to share a little bit about like kind of the synopsis of what this book is about for folks that maybe have heard it,
Mm,
but they haven't read it
right.
themselves, or they're not familiar with what the artist way is.
Mhm. The people that I think are the ideal folks for this workshop are people who have it on their bookshelf, and it's just been there, like, forever. And they're interested and they're curious, but I've met, like, one person who's gone through the book and done the exercises and stuff on their own. Like, there's something about, this book that I feel like needs to be experienced in community. So, to answer your question,
Mm.
synopsis of the book. Gosh, really a lot of, kind of what I was saying before, about the fact that you don't need to completely change your life. You don't need to completely change your personality in order to to have more creativity in your life. In order to make it like even a daily or weekly or whatever thing for you and fulfill that part of you that needs to be expressed. She uses one thing that's I think is important to talk about, which she talks about at the very beginning of the book, are the basic tools, and anybody can do this. You don't have to read the book, you don't have to do the workshop, like anybody can do this. The two basic tools are the morning pages, which you may have heard of,
Mhm.
and the artist date. And so the morning pages is simply it's simple, but there's a lot of people have a lot of questions about this when it comes to the technicalities. But she says, Julia Cameron says, every day, write 3 pages, 8.5 by 11, write 3 pages longhand, like right after you wake up. Like first thing you do, get all that out so that I mean I think the reason is so that you can clear your mind in
Mhm.
order for some of this inspiration to come in, or just to kind of get it all out. At a certain point, I think like week 8, week 9, we go back and read the pages, which is also fascinating, and look for things that maybe are important or things we want to change. The other basic tool is the artist date. And again, anybody can do this. Everybody should do this, in my opinion. Um, Take yourself out on a date. There's a story I tell, my classic artist date story. Um, is I took myself to the Museum of Photographic Arts in Balboa Park in San Diego, near where I live. And it's a great museum. I know I like that museum. I thought I would have fun. But here's the thing, like, you're not taking your adult part out on a date. You're taking your inner artist child, okay? So I go to this Museum of Photographic Arts, I'm looking at it, I'm appreciating it, and then I hear this voice inside, this internal voice. It's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so dumb. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? I don't wanna do this," you know? My inner artist child was, like, not into it at all. And so internally, I have a little conversation with it. It's okay, all right, we're gonna go through the museum and then we'll go do whatever you want. Okay. Okay. So went through the museum, and then after that, I just kind of followed the inspiration of my child part. Got an ice cream cone, sat and listened to one of the musicians who was playing outside. Of course, it was San Diego, it was a lovely day. So I just sat there and had a great time. So even if you do it wrong, you can learn a lot, right? About that part of you that
Mm.
may be a little less encumbered, right? A little less concerned about what people think of me or how I'm going to look if I go do this thing. She talks about in the book, go to the store with 5 or 10 bucks and like buy some little crayons and trinkets and or whatever. It doesn't have to be extravagant. That's the other thing she talks about in the book. Um, yeah, it doesn't have to be a lot to have these little luxuries in your life, things you may not even realize you were missing.
Mhm. There is something to be said, I think, about dating yourself. I think for some people, it
Yeah.
might be uncomfortable to like go and do something by themselves. Like it feels
Mhm.
uncomfortable to go to a restaurant and eat by themselves or like to go to a museum or I don't know. I like cherish those days where I like especially if I'm on vacation and I have like an entire day and it's like
Mm.
just my decisions. I don't have to concern myself of like compromising of like what somebody else wants to do. I get to just follow
Right.
that inspiration of like, I'm feeling led to this place right now. I don't want to be here anymore. I'm feeling led to this place right now. And just like seeing what unfolds. And usually it's like
Yeah.
pretty magical.
Usually, yeah. I just got this image in my mind of a jellyfish, just kind of like going around, like, let's go over here. Let's float this direction. Yeah, yeah, no, it's so much fun. I mean, I love things like, for example, you get called to jury duty, you show up, they let you go early. Oh, that's the greatest time ever, right? Because
Definitely.
now you have a full day that literally has no plans and you can just do whatever you want. I loved like on those days too. Like one time I have this little uh uh picture album of pictures I took when I was on jury duty and I got let out early and I just walked home. And
Mm.
I will never forget that day because it was one of the most magical things I've ever experienced because I would have had that experience of checking out things in my neighborhood in that way, looking at all the colors, the people, the cats, you know? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not for everybody, but that's the thing too. Like I think it's important to really identify the actual things that that make us feel happy and joyful, and most of them, at least for me, are creative,
Mhm.
music, like I said, photography, like whatever it is. um and yeah, and kind of let the ego just take a little break for a while.
Oh, for sure. I I went through a period of time like early in my career where I felt like I really wasn't producing a lot of artwork, because I was just so
Mhm.
focused on the therapy part of what I was doing that I just wasn't allowing time even for like AM journaling or something like that, where it's like I'm not creating
Right.
any work to sell, but I'm still creating something for me. And I really invested a lot of creative energy in the kitchen, in like how I cook. I feel like
Mm,
that's a real
yes.
creative process for me. I'm not a recipe follower,
Yes.
but like there's like a lot of joy there. And so it was like I could nourish myself all week long with these like really
Mm,
fun, creative, healthy dishes that I made. But I also had that satisfaction of creating and like figuring out
right.
of like, oh, what spices should go together? Oh, how should I layer that? Oh, this is how, like how every little piece and part comes together. Um, and I don't know. I felt like that was what I needed at the time.
Yeah.
And I still try to incorporate that, although I haven't been cooking as much as I would like to, but so many
Yeah,
ways
I
to integrate the
hearing
creativity.
exactly. And again, yeah, that's exactly, what she talks about in the book and what I firmly believe. And I just had to say that just hearing you say that story, I can feel the joy and I had a little sigh of relaxation. I was like, ah, yeah, that sounds nice. Right. And again,
Yeah.
it's not anything fancy. It's not anything, you're not selling your food. You don't have to. It's okay. I mean, it's interesting. I've done a lot of singing. I started taking lessons. I was in choir and stuff in undergrad, but when I was 30, I lived in LA. I don't know if I told you, I used to be a newspaper copy editor. That's what I did for 14 years before
Oh
becoming a
my
therapist.
gosh. Wow.
So
That
every day, and it was so funny because I thought, well, I haven't written a book or anything. And then I realized I have written tens of thousands of headlines. I've written so many words. um, so, oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought.
that's okay. So I
Oh,
think
oh, you were
that's
talking about
really
cooking and yeah.
yeah, I think that's really interesting in terms of like transition from the one career to the other, but you're still oh, that's okay. I have a dog
It'll
too.
stop.
So
Oh, good. It's my mom's. We closed everything up to try to try to make it
it's okay.
quiet, but
Well, they have a lot to say, you know. They need to use
we
their
like
voice
to
too.
express. It's true. It's true. Okay. Oh.
But yeah, I feel like there's like in what you are doing, that's creative work. And
100%.
so you're still it's still like you're you're growing your skill set, right? Using it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why, so I feel like, going into private practice and doing marketing was a very, natural transition for me. I, designed my own website because I used to design newspaper pages as well as write headlines. And I forget I forget sometimes that other people didn't have that experience, you know? They're like, "Oh, I'm gonna pay somebody to do my website." And my first thought is like, "Why would you do that? Why don't you just do it yourself?" Or I'm like, "Okay, wait, 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 no, no, no. This is everybody has different skills, and I just happen to sort of design my life in a way where they kind of flowed naturally into each other. So it's been nice."
No, that's amazing. So, for folks that are like not, they don't identify as a creative writer, they don't identify as like copywriting doesn't come easy to them, which I think for a lot of therapists it doesn't
Mhm.
because we're still stuck in that academic, like, I need to have it in
Mm.
APA style with references to all of the research. And which
Yeah.
people don't really want to read that on your website. Um, you know, do you have any advice for folks that are like trying to go through that? Like, what should they do? How could they help themselves write their copy more
Mhm.
effectively for their website and their niche?
So, um, this may be a little bit controversial, and I certainly am not 100% am not advocating for plagiarism. Okay, I'm not advocating for that. However, what came to mind when you were talking was one of my favorite books about art, which is called Steal Like an Artist. So, here's how I think that idea may apply here. For example, when I was designing my website, now I do have the skills enough to do that. I'm not, that's not quite my naturally, I'm more of a writer than a designer. So what I did is I found a designer who I like, who designs websites for therapists, and I looked up those websites, right? I was like, I like this. This speaks to me. I like this style. I'm going to design mine in this way. I didn't rip her off. I got inspiration that way for, things that I respond to as a person. Same with writing. Go through the different people's profiles, websites, and see if what you respond to as a person. If you were a client, maybe that's really simple, but if you were a client, who would you want to see? Why would you want to see them? That's what I would suggest for that. Yeah, it's like I said, it seems like pretty simple advice, but that's the best advice I would give. Like, yeah,
Mm.
and you're not going to be graded.
No, no grade, and everything is always editable and changeable. Um,
Yes.
right.
And it should evolve, I think,
Hmm.
Um, it's funny when I was really excited about marketing and very driven and loved the hustle and, did that. And then my practice became full and I was like, oh, now I love my therapy practice, but it's sort of a different part of my brain. It's connected, but it's a different part of my brain that when my my practice became, I was like, well, what do I do now on in the business side, right? It was tough. I'm still kind of working on that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that I've heard somebody say even when you're full, you don't want to do an abrupt halt to your marketing. You still want to stay consistent with
Mhm.
it, especially if you're using blogs and things on your website, because you don't want the Google bot to
Mhm.
disregard you as like, oh, they're not relevant anymore. They're not publishing anything new on their site. Um,
Yeah, and that's why. So what I do is in that case, I specifically aim at my marketing toward things that I like. Again, this is kind of a topic today. It's like, right? Like what are some of the things we actually enjoy doing? Why is that important? I'll tell you why that's important because I don't think I have ever felt burned out.
mm,
And I think part of the reason is because, yeah, honestly, part of the reason is probably because I have an ADHD brain. And if I don't want to do it, if I'm not interested, I don't do it. If it's not fun, it's not happening. Okay. So, for example, what I do if I have extra if I do have extra time, if I want to keep my marketing up, I do podcasts. I love doing podcast interviews. And then I can turn that into a blog post that keeps my, do you know what I mean? Like connected,
Mm-hmm.
put it on my Facebook, keep people interested. Another thing that I do is I still, even though I'm full and I put a note on my website that I may have limited availability, I will still have spots open in my schedule for prospective clients to contact me. Now, may or may not be a good fit for a variety of reasons, including I may be full at that time. In that case, I consider this to be part of the service to the community. I make it a key thing for me to be aware of other therapists who have availability of what they're doing, who do they serve. That's really important to me because I know how hard it is to find a therapist. And I just to have somebody like just to be able to schedule a time to talk to someone and know that they're going to be there and know that they're going to answer the phone, that can make all the difference in the world. Whether I work with them or not is not the point, right? And so, yeah, so those are kind of ways where I stay relevant in the community, as it were, and in and things that mean something to me, align with my values, and are fun. Yes.
Yes, I love that you're thinking about it from that perspective of like, what do I enjoy doing? What are the things that I enjoy doing when it comes to marketing and do
100%.
those? I think so many people
Yes.
get stuck of like, well, I
Yep.
hate social media, but everybody says I need to be doing social media. No, you don't. There's plenty of other things that you could be doing that might align better, because if not, you're going to have
Hmm.
all that like stuck energy come up. It's going to feel
Hmm.
frustrating. You're going to feel defeated, like all that
And
stuff.
that will be reflected in your marketing. Do you know what I mean? If
Hmm.
you let's do this. This is a pretty good example, I think, because I'm an introvert and I don't really like networking events, but sometimes I'll go. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. Now, if I go to a networking event and I'm like, ugh, I don't want to be here, right? And I come in with that type of energy, who's gonna want to refer to me? I wouldn't, right? Like, no, 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 no. However, if somebody hears me talking one on one with somebody in a podcast and they see my personality and they see how animated and comfortable I am, yeah, maybe then I will look like somebody who would be a good fit for whomever. So I think that, yeah, it's not just our internal experience. That's important because of the burnout factor I mentioned earlier, right? Because if I'm doing a lot of things I don't like to do because I think I have to or I should, like, yeah, that's going to feel terrible.
Yeah.
So there's that factor for the therapist. And then I think it's important to think about what am I projecting out into the world? Because if I'm excited, fired up about something, that's what we'll project. If I'm deflated and don't want to be there, that's what people are going to see. And that could come out even in our writing, kind of like we were talking
Mhm.
earlier, right? If I'm thinking like, oh yeah, I gotta write in this academic way and blah blah blah, yeah, of course it's gonna seem boring and irrelevant because that's what I think about it.
Right.
Yeah, so it's okay to step out of that and be real, like be an actual authentic human being. I think that's what people respond to. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Especially in the writing on the website. If it's too above people's heads and they're in a state of like distress and
Yeah.
discomfort, the bandwidth to process a lot of dense information really isn't going to be there.
Hmm. No, you're
Um,
totally right. Yeah. Yeah, I think on my first page, my homepage, I don't know, I have at most 50 words,
mm,
right? It's like, here's who I am, here's who I treat, here's my specialties. You can find out more with these other links. But for
mhm,
now, that's all you need to know, you know?
I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I feel like my websites are works in progress that are currently in
Good.
need of a
As all they
lot of
should be.
editing. They need a lot of editing. But I feel like progress, not perfection. There are other things that are seem more urgent and important to take care of than
Yeah.
going through and editing them. They exist, they're out there. we'll get to it. When you're
And the
working
thing
with,
is too, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I'm
Please.
sorry. we're,
Oh, no,
we're,
no, no. I jumped in. I was just thinking like it also depends on who you're trying to attract as well. I mean, like I said, I have an ADHD brain. I work the best honestly with people who kind of have the same type of thing. And so I don't want to see a lot of stuff right at the beginning. I just want to know what's up. And then maybe I can hyper focus and dive in later, right? If you're somebody who works with people who maybe are more academically minded, like maybe you literally work with academics, in
mm,
that case, if I did, I'd probably put my credentials up and, up front, real prominent, and other things that I think might look attractive to that population. So I think it's also really important that there's no right or wrong way to do it. And that's why I responded when you said that's a work in progress. And I said, yeah, it should be, we should always be tweaking, making adjustments because we always change too. And I think that's also important to reflect as well.
This episode of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast is brought to you by Florida Art Therapy Services, my group practice. I just wanted to share with you that we are offering a host of continuing education trainings in December, starting in December and going into the spring of 2023. On December 12th, we're going to be offering a 6-hour supervision training specifically for art therapy. I know for folks that happen to hold the ATRBC, the ATCB issued like a new requirement where we're all responsible for having 6 hours of art therapy supervision CEs for our recertification periods. And so we're offering that. It's a really fun training. It's going to be online and it will be interactive and experiential. We'll be making lots of art throughout the training. So you can find that on our website, www.floridaarttherapyservices.com. If you click on the continuing education tab, the menu will drop down with all of the trainings that we're offering. Additionally, we'll be teaching the 12-hour qualified supervisor training and the 4-hour qualified supervisor refresher training for licensed folks in Florida. We have several opportunities for those in the spring. We're going to be offering medical errors and domestic violence training, which are required for our license renewal in Florida. So check those out. And we're working on adding some more art therapy specific intensive offerings in 2023. So we'll be sharing those with you, I'm sure, in um, this season 2 of the show that'll air in 2023. As like therapists in business, how can we like incorporate this philosophy um into like the different administrative tasks that we're responsible for,
Oh
right?
boy.
Because like there's sometimes I know I need to complete a task, but my energy and brain capacity to do it just isn't there. And I think it's, similar brain function, right? Like I have a million balls in the air all at the same time, and um, everything needs attention, but I don't have time necessarily to give everything all the attention in that moment. Like, how do you approach it from this like
Yeah.
artist creative way to make it all work?
So I think as artists and creatives, maybe in particular, we kind of think that we have to do everything ourselves. And
Yeah.
so I guess I don't know if this is artistic or creative, but here's my answer to that is outsource.
Mm,
And when I started doing that, it made my life a lot easier because there are a lot of things as therapists that we can't outsource, right? Like our notes, for example. Like we have to do our own documentation appropriately, so that's fine. Things though, I noticed there were certain things in my practice that I had to do every day, but were super simple and kind of dumb in my opinion, that the child part of me is like, So there are these things that I had to do every day. They were very simple, but if I didn't do them every day, they would get way behind, like scheduling, marking people as paid, whatever. So I got a virtual assistant who also happens to be my sister, but that's nice too. I got a virtual assistant to help me with those daily tasks, and it makes a huge difference. This is something I did after uh, at the beginning of the pandemic. I decided to let my office go, and I, kind of had some extra funds, and it's not a lot of money to hire somebody to do things that probably take up more room in our brain space than they need to. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? So that's been my answer. And even with the podcast that I'm launching, okay, I'm a writer, but sometimes kind of like with therapists with writing, like sometimes it's the last thing I want to do, right? So I wanted to do show notes for my podcast, and because I love it when people have like really,
Mhm.
interesting show notes so I can see what's going on at the podcast. But it was feeling like such a burden. And finally I remembered, like, not only does my sister help me with this virtual assistant stuff, she also used to be a journalist. I was like,
Oh, wow.
oh, yes, of course. She has a journalism degree. She can help me with this. So I asked her if she would write the show notes, and she has. And not only did she write the show notes, she did for me without me even asking. She did a complete breakdown of everything that we talked about in the show, which is
Wow.
amazing. And so much work. I could do that, right? But I don't
Yes.
want to, and I literally do not have time. It would bring everything to a halt, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to bring things to a halt. So yeah, outsource.
I feel like I need to outsource that task. I've been doing it myself. And I mean,
Yeah.
my assistant edits the podcast and she does a
Mhm.
lot of other parts, moving parts that have to do with scheduling and so many things. But in terms of the show notes, I've been the one writing those. But it would be
Mhm.
so nice. It would be so nice to have
It's
that
nice.
task delegated to someone else. And I don't think I do a very good job. And mostly it's
Aw.
because I feel crunched on time,
Of course, of
right?
course.
It's like,
Yeah.
here's a few bullet points about what we talked about. Here's the bullet points of
Right. Yeah.
resources. But I know I've seen other folks where it's a really rich, beautiful,
Mhm.
like breakdown and like paragraph structured form, or even sometimes it's like a total transcript, which is really
Right,
cool too.
right.
Um, so that's something I need to look into. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a good reminder, and maybe, creatives, artists, maybe also as therapists in particular, we don't have to do everything ourselves. It's okay, It's okay to, yeah, to lighten our load a little bit. It's important, again, with this idea of burning out or not burning out. It's really important to recognize, when we're not happy, when we're not joyful in our work, because just like on our websites, that's reflected, or at a networking event, I think with our clients, like
Mhm.
that's what I tell my clients sometimes when it comes up, that I need to make sure that I'm okay when I
Yeah.
come into session. Now, am I perfect? Never. Nobody is. It's fine. But
Mhm.
I need to like really attend to my nervous system. Being a EMDR and also a brain spotting therapist, it's like I understand the importance of that. Like I really need to attend to my nervous system and make sure I'm not feeling overwhelmed so that I can focus all of my attention in that moment on my clients. And that's the way I like to work. And as long as I can, as long as I'm able, for all the various reasons, I want to bring that to my work. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And if we're really unhappy and overwhelmed, it's going to be much harder for us to harness that energy to have that level of attentiveness um,
Yeah.
with our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to come back. It's not impossible, but once I'll speak for myself, once I kind of tip over into that overwhelm space, it's like, I don't want to do anything, right? That, and
Yeah.
so I think it's really important. And again, that's why I love the artist way, that's why I love working with creative people, because like I think that that part of our lives, like to me, I mean, that's art and music and everything. That's what makes life worth living. Why else am I here? What's like really, what's the purpose? Like for me personally, it's that expression, not just myself, but also appreciating others. Like I love going to, plays and symphony and like all that stuff. Like it just fills me up, And to me,
Mhm.
that's the whole point. Maybe I don't know if it's a good, bad, or indifferent meaning of life, but but it's certainly true for me. So I'm just going with that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think that there's something really um wonderful when we can kind of walk through life from awe-inspired moment to
Mhm.
awe-inspired moment.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that does happen when we give a lot of attention to living a creative life and appreciating the creativity that exists within humanity. um
Yeah.
like I sometimes like I know during COVID when everything was shut down, because like there's really not a
Mm.
lot to do, so I just started walking, and I would walk for
Mm.
miles and but go into all of these neighborhoods that I'd never been in before, but they were
Mhm.
near to me. And I just like found such joy looking at all of the different quirky ways that people decorated their
Mhm.
yard, and the different mailboxes, and of course the different architectural designs and gardens. And you know there's just something really like there's a way to see life through
Mhm.
creative, like really
Yeah.
I'm losing my words for it, but like the
Hard to
way
describe.
the way in which we look at life, really pulling out the creativity and the beauty that we're surrounded by wherever we are.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it reminds me of my jury duty walk that I mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you had that experience too. That's so cool, of seeing the neighborhoods in a different way that you never would have any other time. Quick
No.
side note, like, I actually don't like to cook, but during at the beginning of the pandemic, I was making all sorts of like vegetable soup and stuff.
Yeah.
That didn't really stick, but it was helpful. And it was good to use my hands. I mean, that's we could, talk all about that importance of creativity too, right? Of getting being in the physical world. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's important. And more maybe more important to some of us than others, which, is also why I like to work with creative people, because I don't think all therapists, they don't have that experience necessarily, or they might not understand how important art, music, etc., are to a client and why they're important. And I feel like when I work with my clients, at least if even if I don't know the particulars, of a certain genre of art,
Hmm.
at least I understand why that it's important, and I understand the level of importance that that might have for somebody. And I think that's real important, and frankly, just saves a lot of time.
Yeah. I would say for sure. Um, if somebody really like they identify as like they live, eat, sleep, breathe
Yep.
expression,
Yep.
that to work with somebody doesn't who doesn't live their life in that way. It's like the difference between being a live to eat person and an eat to live person, right? Those are
Mhm.
two
Mhm.
really different perspectives on ways of being and existing in the world.
Yep.
And so if somebody is that live to express person and they're with somebody who is like, oh no, I'm totally like, logical and
Right.
orderly, and this is how we do life, that's it's gonna be a different experience, and it might create
Yeah.
challenges. Not that we don't hold the
Right.
capacity to empathize with somebody who has an experience that we don't, but I think when we have the intimate knowledge of the experience, it we have better language to
Mhm.
translate so that when we're talking about it, that person really feels that depth of like, oh, wow, you really understand my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I literally know what it's like to stand on a stage and you can't get your hands to stop shaking. Like, I you know, maybe that's not the exact experience somebody has, but I know what that's like. And I also know that after a while, my hands stopped shaking
Mhm,
over time, right? So I also can offer hope that, like, I have that lived experience of, like, I know what it's like. I mean, I've had, creative wounds that feel like such huge losses. I mean, we could put that under she talks about that in the artist way too. How do we deal with our creative losses? You can put that under the umbrella of grief
mhm.
and loss. It really,
Yeah.
when, like you said, when you identify, right, you live, eat, and breathe it, that's a loss.
Mhm,
That's important. That's something to be mourned and respected.
mhm.
Um, and again,
Right.
anybody can have that perspective. I mean, that's part of the reason why, again, I think it's good to get the message out, right? That, like, um, these folks are out there, and that this is how it might be helpful to them.
I think you're right. I think that is really profound. And growing up, my dad was very artistic and skilled. And when he
Mm,
was in high school, he went to an arts-based high school. And I'm not exactly sure of the exact details of the story, but the art teacher had encouraged him to submit his entire like portfolio of work to be shown in some exhibit. Um, and then it ended up being stolen.
oh
And
my goodness.
yeah, and that was like a an enormous psychic wounding for him and trauma that he carried with him, into adulthood. And I think
Yeah.
it limited him from living a more creative
Mm,
life, that he stopped creating in the way he had once created in this like very prolific way,
open, yeah, prolific, yeah.
because his work was stolen. And you're right, I mean, it's a tremendous uh
Mhm.
experience of grief.
Right, and it's kind of like, I don't, I would hope, a therapist wouldn't say this, but it reminds me of that really, really, really bad advice if people lose a pet or even a child. And that really
Mhm.
bad advice of, like, well, you can always get another one, right? I think sometimes maybe, well, you can, I don't understand, like, just make some more art, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
No.
unfortunately not the way to go. Yeah, just like it wouldn't be in either of those other situations. Like, it's self-expression. I mean, just in that word is the word self, right? And when we express ourselves and something happens like that, like, oh man, I was, when you were starting telling the story, I thought, oh yeah, academics, maybe there was some criticism, but I wasn't it. It was, but to actually have your expression gone, yeah, that's devastating, and I'm so sad to hear that that affected him in that
Mhm.
way, and yeah, that's tough.
And it like stunted his career. He wanted to use that to go to art school, and of course he didn't have anything.
Right.
This predates this predates like, you know, uh
Mm.
being a being
Mhm.
able to really save stuff in another
Oh,
format.
right, yeah. Right, right,
Like
right.
I'm
Yeah.
sure there were cameras around back then, but he didn't have he didn't. have photographic evidence of his work. You know what I mean? Like
Wow.
that, it just
Yeah.
wasn't, I think, as common then
Mhm.
as they're ubiquitous now. Who doesn't have a camera? Who
Right.
doesn't have multiple cameras? Right.
I was just thinking, I don't know, maybe this is too dark, but I was like, well, I guess in a way it was a compliment that somebody's art was probably pretty good. And I mean, if somebody wanted it that bad, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's rough. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, and that's kind of where, again, this could be a whole other topic, but that's really where the trauma treatment that I do comes in. Yeah, sometimes about creative losses. Sometimes creatives come to me and we discover that actually it's about, some other kind of loss or some other thing that happened, And
Yeah.
so that's kind of why I like to, that's how my approach is, I kind of looking at the creative part and the entire person, to kind of see where we should go. Yeah.
Very holistic
For
lens.
sure.
hmm
Hmm.
Yeah. So when you facilitate the Artist Way workshops, um, can you just kind of share like
Mm,
how you structure those? Is it like a one
sure.
time, like a few hours, or is it like over a course of a period of weeks? Like what does that look like if
Right.
somebody is to do that with you?
Great. Yeah. It's so the book is 12 chapters. And so we meet for 12 weeks. I had considered meeting for 13 weeks, like having the first week be, sort of an introductory, but I like the roundness of the number 12. What can I say? So we're keeping it at
Mm-hmm.
12. And yeah, we meet for an hour and a half online. When we're in person, we used to meet for 2 hours, but 2 hours is a lot of time on the internet. So we meet for an hour and a half. Um, we usually open up with talking about our morning pages and our artist dates, just kind of see where everybody is, see if they have questions. And you're right, for some people, the artist dates are really hard. For some people, the morning pages are really hard. So we just kind of talk about that together, get support. And then because I can't, like, my degrees in creative writing, a lot of it was, it could have been like an English degree. So a lot of it was in like English literature. And so I'm used to being, and I went to a small liberal arts school. So I'm used to being in a small group of people. I never have more than 10 people in the Artist Way group. A small group of people discussing a book. Like that's what I'm used to. That's the way that we do it. So I lead the discussion. We go through the chapter and I have people, I ask for, like I said, it is a discussion. It is interactive. It isn't me sitting talking about stuff. Um, so, people ask questions, people talk about things that really called out to them or things that they disagreed with. I mean, this book was written like 25, 30 years ago. Like, there's a lot of it that's dated. There's a lot of it that isn't. And I think that when you go back and read it at different parts of your life, you will find different new helpful things. It's really cool that way.
Mm.
So we discuss all of it though, and it's so funny as for me as a facilitator, I really don't like the first. I never have a good time the first session because nobody knows each other. Everybody's feeling a little weird. I'm feeling weird. By about session 8 or 9, that's when things really start to groove in and people really appreciate and really love each other. I mean, that it can't help but happen when you're being vulnerable in that way. And it's such a cool thing. Quick side story: one time when we met in person, it was about week 9, and I had been doing very intensive. Most of my grad school was online, but we did have these very intensive in person classes, like 8 to 5 Monday through Saturday, kind of like group therapy all day. It was what, and I did get burnt out. I was over the edge. My nervous system was shot. I had showed up to class like 15 minutes late, um, and I come in. And they're all like working on little somebody brought in pipe cleaners and they were just making little animals. They didn't even notice I wasn't there. And I told them, I said, "Hey guys, I'm really not in a place to lead this group tonight, but I'm here. I don't know what to do." They're like, "Oh, don't worry, just sit. We'll take care of it." And they did. Like they just did the whole group themselves, and I just hung out, and it was beautiful. And that's why, like, it literally is my favorite thing to do because the community that's created is just magical. I don't even know why. I don't know how. I try my best, to set it up so that we have that experience together. Most of the times it works. Sometimes it hasn't, but most of the times it does. And it's just really, really cool and just wonderful to see people open up that way.
Do you do like a creative ending in the final week, like some creative thing
Oh
together?
yeah. Okay. We do graduation. And
Oh.
and what I tell people, which is the truth, is that I learned how to do it this way by watching Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, I gotta admit. So, and it's really cool. What we do is like we take each person individually, and I will first say my experience of them in the workshop, and then we open it up to anybody else. And you don't have to talk though. That's a nice thing. You can say something, you can not. Maybe you text them later, or maybe you don't. No big deal. We open it up for people to also share their experience of that person, and then that person gets to share their experience of the class. And yeah, I'm getting chills thinking about it right now because it's so touching and it's so wonderful to offer. It's almost like what's coming to mind, again, maybe a little dark, but it's almost like being at your own funeral, you know? It's like you get to you would get to actually hear what people appreciate about you and how they loved you being there and what and the contributions that you made and how much they care. So yeah,
Mm,
it's really fun.
I love that. Yeah. Very, very honoring of each
Yes, yes, yes.
individual's creative process and vulnerability throughout the course of the group.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. Is there anything else that you feel like would be valuable for listeners to hear about integrating this like artist way of living into their practice growth and development?
You know, that I'll just go with what popped in my mind first, which is there's a part of the book where she talks about the number one thing that artists want is to be left alone. And, you know,
Oh,
that may sound a certain way. I don't know. But again, I think, you know, this kind of goes along with the artist state thing we were talking about earlier. To artists to be left alone, like with your own inner artist child, with your own creativity, with your own self-expression. Allow my advice for anybody would be to allow yourself, give yourself some time for that, even really, even if it's only 5 minutes a day. Give
mhm.
yourself some time to, you know, jot down a little poem or doodle a little bit, or, you know, listen to something that really makes you happy. Like those parts of us are in us, that are in our inner artist child is in us, and it's paying attention, and it will speak up and throw tantrums. So so I think it's important to honor that. Speaking of the, you know, honoring and respecting and all that, I think it's important to honor that and know that it's never going to go away. We can't, you know, and it shouldn't, in my opinion. That part of us shouldn't go away. It's not going to go away. So let's see how we can best also honor the parts of ourselves that maybe aren't so, you know, mature, buttoned up therapist with all the correct boundaries and rules. And you know, it's okay to push against that a little bit, and there's parts of us that will really appreciate that we did. So that's what I would say to
Yes.
folks.
I think that last part is so needed for people to hear, to
I
give
agree.
themselves permission to not have to be in the perfect professional role all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Like we have to
yeah.
allow ourselves that playful part too, that like fun, creative, lively rule breaker out. We got to
And
let
it's
them out.
yeah, it's risky. It's risky. Art is risky. That's what it's all about, right? Because art shines a light on things that maybe some other people might not want you to shine a light on, right? So it is a
Mm.
risk, and it's okay if you're not there. You know, you don't feel like doing that. That's all right. Yeah, I would encourage experimentation though, and see what happens. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. If folks that are listening want to learn more about you, your practice, and perhaps maybe join your next Artist Way workshop,
Mhm.
where can they find more information about you?
Sure. So my website is rachelmoorecounseling.com. Um, and you can find me there, and you can find the Artist Way workshop information there. I should be posting some updates pretty soon. Probably the next workshop will start in February. You can also check out the new podcast Beyond Artist Block, where, like I said, like my whole goal is to find people like me. So if you are one of those people too, like feel free to reach out to me. Maybe we can chat. Um, just as a side note, like when I posted this in one of the Facebook groups, within 3 days I had 16 people scheduled. We're out there, you know.
Wow,
This I think people want to talk about this stuff. We just haven't had a place to do it, you know,
that's
in quite a
awesome.
particular way. Yeah, so I'm excited about it, and yeah, it's my fun creative project too. So that's where you can find all of that.
Lovely. Well, I will definitely put your practice website, rachelmoorecounseling.com, in the show notes. And I will also put a link to the Beyond Artist Block podcast in the show notes so people can find that too. And I think I need to put a link for the book too, the
Oh
Artist's
yeah,
Way
yeah,
book.
great idea.
So if folks are interested that aren't acquainted, that you have an easy way of picking up a copy and checking it out for yourself. I really appreciate you taking the time today and talking with me. This was really fun.
Thank you. I had such a good time too. I just love talking about this stuff. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the show. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Rachel Moore. Um, I felt like she shared some really great information. I think, particularly, like this idea of working in ways that align with our energy source is so important. It's so easy for us to get drained in the work that we do, particularly when we're doing all of the things. We're the therapist, we're the administrator, we're the marketer, we're all of the things. Um, so it's important for us to pick projects that really, really energize us so that have that we have that stamina to push through and do the work without feeling overwhelmed and fatigued. All right, take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.